That's perfect. Thank you very much. So, hi, and yeah, it's really a pleasure to be here at the Microsoft 365 Live event 2021. Before I get started, obviously we do have to shout out to our sponsors for the event, which you can see their logos on the screen now. So thank you very much to our sponsors. And today's session is all about Teams and data loss prevention. So really what we're looking at is how to ensure secure and compliant collaboration within Microsoft Teams. Before we start, I just wanted to give you a bit of information about your speaker today. So my name is Kat Greenan and I'm a Microsoft Solutions Specialist at a Microsoft Gold partner based in the UK. I specialise in Microsoft Teams, hence my session for today. And I have a blog called collabwithcat.com. So you can see that site there on the screen. I share tips and tricks on how to use Microsoft Teams, so please feel free to subscribe. I am on social media, so LinkedIn, you can search for my name, and you'll see my Twitter handle there, greenincat. Please follow me on Twitter if you want to find out more about any new updates with Microsoft Teams. I'm always sharing lots of new features on there. So let's get started. What we're going to cover today is some of the compliance challenges. So really we're going to look at what compliance challenges organizations are facing and really talk about the amount of data that we're having to work with now. We're going to show you what DLP actually is. So you might see this acronym pop up a lot. So DLP obviously is standing for data loss prevention. So we want to talk about what it is and why it's important. Then we're going to jump into a live demonstration. So I want to show you how to actually create a DLP policy in your admin center and also what that looks like from an end user perspective. We will then look at some new features of data loss prevention because the technology is ever evolving and ever changing. So we want to make sure we're aware of any new features. And then finally, I'm going to end on some of the licensing requirements. And there are some prereqs required for DLP for different things. So I'll make sure and cover that so you're well aware of the licensing requirements before we start. So as more and more employees, start to shift and work remotely, it's really, really important that we're prioritizing and protecting our business critical and sensitive data. And that's around applications, endpoints, and cloud services like Teams. Now, if you think about you as an employee, you're accessing, sharing, you're creating and storing data in brand new ways than you ever did before. And what we really need to make sure that we're doing is sharing and accessing this data in a protected and compliant manner. And with this massive growth of corporate data, it's ever increasing, especially with remote working. There's a lot more more complex compliance requirements that we need to protect. We need to govern the data and manage the risk as well as we go through this digital transformation. Really, just to finish on this slide, I guess business continuity is really important in today's landscape, and we really must rely on us as employees to stay connected and productive outside of the traditional borders of business. And so in doing that, we're actually identifying potential risks within the organization, in terms of safeguarding intellectual property or data. So one of the, and this is actually ever increasing, what you can see on my screen is a statistic for the amount of daily active users on Microsoft Teams. That's over 145 million every single day. I can imagine that's, by the time I added the slide, I bet it's increased even from them. And really what this is showing is that you can see in the January to March time, that's when the growth really kind of increased. And the amount of people that are relying on something like Microsoft Teams for their day-to-day work is huge, which means that when we're sharing and accessing information through Teams, that might include sensitive information, confidential information. And so as an organization, what we want to make sure that we're doing is protecting that data that is being used and shared within Microsoft Teams. And it's a challenge. Discovering and managing data is very challenging. And all organizations will deal with, sensitive data in a different way. But it's easier said than done. And just finding that data is sometimes a challenge. Knowing how to identify it, where it's located, and how it's being shared is such a big problem. 80% of data is now dark. And so that means there's no wonder that 88% of organizations have no confidence that they can detect, the loss of sensitive data. And if we add to that the fact that we're currently remote working, data being shared through non-corporate devices, non-corporate locations, and the problem just gets bigger and bigger. But we do have a solution to all of this negativity, which is, of course, the compliance tools that you'll have access to in Microsoft 365. We are going to be focusing today on data loss prevention, but it's good to kind of understand information protection and governance in Microsoft 365 as well. And that's really all about following the data wherever it is and protecting it wherever it lives. So if you think about after, data is created or originated, typically you'll want to have a system in place to scan and detect sensitive data as it's moving across, devices and applications and services. And in most environments, only a small percentage of, the entire large amounts of data that we have actually contains sensitive information. And the key is really to be able to identify and detect the data that contains that sensitive information that you care about, because not everything you have is going to be sensitive. Then once you've, detected that sensitive data, what we want to be able to do is protect it. We want to classify and label that data in a manner that reflects its sensitivity. So we have tools that are available to us, like information protection, that allows us to classify data depending on its sensitivity. So for example, if we have types of data that might be employee information, a credit card number, or a national insurance number, it's something that we might actually want to classify as a confidential piece of information. Whereas if you had a little bit more crucial data, like personal information from a customer, for example, you might want to label that as highly confidential. So we're not just dealing with the fact that we have sensitive data, but there's different levels of that sensitivity as well. Now, once that data has been stamped with a sensitivity label, what we can do is apply appropriate policies to protect it where it is. And this should be automatically applied to that data as well. And that might include several protective actions like encryption, restricting access rights, applying visual markings, retention, and so on. And things like data loss prevention actions, so we can't share certain things, and so on. And whether the data stays in one place or it moves around, it's really critical that we have the tools as an IT to be able to monitor that data, how it's being shared, how it's been used, and respond quickly to any threats or potential abuse. And then finally, depending on the sensitivity of that data and the defined policy, that data ages, and so it might actually be subject to expiration. That's where we look at stale and dark data, where we can put things like retention policies in place to delete certain items after a certain period of time. So you can see that there's a lot of considerations to evaluate in the step of each cycle when it comes to knowing your data, protecting your data, preventing the data loss, and then governing your data, making sure that you don't have a huge amount of stale or dark data sitting in different locations, not doing anything. Let's make sure we're being compliant with any regulations that we have. So that's giving you a kind of overall look. What I want to look at now is just the DLP solution, or the data loss prevention solution, in a bit more detail. So Microsoft's DLP solution provides really a broad range of capabilities that address the modern workplace and some of the unique challenges represented by, all these different environments. And one of the key investment areas is providing a unified and comprehensive solution across lots of different kinds of devices and services where that sensitive data is actually stored and used. And that includes environments that are native to Microsoft, but also non-native Microsoft services and applications. The second critical investment area is really to ensure that, the Microsoft DLP solution remains consistently easy to deploy and manage across all the different workloads. And I will show you an example of how we can actually set that up in our admin center. Now, a lot of customers that we speak to have a really strong desire to just make sure all of the different solutions that they're using can be consolidated into one place. So I have one portal, one place to access and manage the policies, and one place to action any remediations. For administrators, we really want a streamlined experience. We want to be able to identify our data. We want to apply any data loss prevention policies to make sure that we're protecting the use of any sensitive data. And then from an information worker point of view or an end user point of view, you really want a seamless experience. I don't want something that's going to be disruptive or, intrusive to my day-to-day tasks. So Microsoft's data loss prevention policy really is uniquely positioned to meet and exceed all of these requirements. And how it kind of works is essentially we have three key areas with data loss prevention. This is an example I'm showing you on screen, which is Microsoft Teams chat messages. So data loss prevention policies can be applied to a different workload in Office 365. So we can apply it to SharePoint, to Exchange, OneDrive. Now we have the ability to apply it to Teams channel and chat messages. And what this means is we can actually block messages that contain sensitive information. You can see my example on the screen. I have tried to share personal information and credit card information for an employee. Now, because my organization put a DLP policy in place to say, we don't want people sharing credit card numbers through Teams, it's blocked it. It's not allowed me to actually share that. So this happens on any device. If I do that on my mobile, my laptop, my desktop, whichever device I happen to be using, the same thing will happen. What it will also do is it will not only block the message, but it will guide and educate end users with notifications and policy tips. So you can see there's a little icon there that says, what can I do? I can click on that and Microsoft Teams and DLP will actually tell me why it's been blocked and what I can do instead and how I can better share this information. And it's customizable. So obviously we can totally customize the policies. If as an organization, credit card numbers are not sensitive, then you can obviously apply your own type of sensitive information that DLP is going to track and going to block. And really, it leverages the same classification engine, and there's actually there's over 90 different sensitive information types that are used by Microsoft, which are provided as templates that you can use, and you can customize your own. And we'll take a little look at that in a second. So before I dive into the demonstration, I just wanted to share with you why you might want to apply a data loss prevention policy. Why would you want to, prevent data from being shared in certain places or outside of the organization? Well, the obvious, the big first one on there is to protect data from data leakage. Data leakage is usually not malicious. It's usually, someone who shared that information in a not a very appropriate place, but they haven't been educated. They're not sure how to share it in the first place. So it's usually not malicious. And that's where DLP can really come in to help educate your users as well. It's also about not impacting productivity. It's protecting data, but not impacting how your users are working. So what we can actually do with DLP is we can say, okay, I want to put something in place to help with things like false positives. So if somebody tries to share a 16-digit number, DLP might say, oh, that's a credit card number. But what if it's not a credit card number and it just so happens to be a 16-digit number? What happens then? So I'll show you an example of how DLP deals with false positives. It's also great for providing guidance to end users to give them the autonomy to make the right decision themselves about where to share this information. If I share something that I'm not supposed to through Teams, what's helping me to learn from that? I wouldn't call it a mistake, but learning from that, that experience of sharing the information, not being sure where I should actually share it, but having a tip to actually educate me and provide guidance. So DLP, it's a key kind of tool in the compliance stack with Microsoft 365. And the good news is it is included in most licensing packages, but I do have a section on licensing, so I will come to that towards the end. So that is enough slides for now, I think. It's time to actually look at data loss prevention. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you what it looks like from an end user perspective, and then we will dive into the admin center and show you how it kind of works. So I'm going to open up Microsoft Teams, and I'm going to zoom in slightly. I am now in my demo environment, so I'm logged into Microsoft Teams. And my organization has said that credit card numbers are sensitive information, and they do not want credit card numbers shared in any sense through Microsoft Teams chat or channel messages. As an end user, that's not something I might not be aware of it. I might not understand that I'm not allowed to share that information through Teams. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start a new conversation. And I'm going to share this information for an invoice, say. So credit card info for invoice. And then I'm going to type in the credit card number. Here's the number that you asked for. So I'm going to type in a 16-digit number. You'll notice that I don't actually have to put a real credit card number in. DLP is picking up that it's a 16-digit code. What I'm going to do then is hit share. And if you give it a second, it will block the message from being shared. So you can see there, it's just popped up for me. This message was blocked, so it was not sent to that channel. It's given me the reason that it's blocked, this message is blocked, and I can click on the What Can I Do button. So when I click on What Can I Do, you can see your message was blocked due to a policy because it has a credit card number in it. Here's what you can do. You can report it and you can share it elsewhere. Now, the great thing that we can do as an administrator is actually customize this message and customize any notifications or tips that are shared with the user. So we could tell the user exactly how we want them to share that information. So we can say, you know, your message was blocked. If you think it was blocked in error and actually it's not a credit card number, then you can report it so you can share it. But otherwise, you know, you can share it through an encrypted file or email or the appropriate place that you've decided to share that information as an organization. And this will apply to channels, channel messages, and chat messages as well, if I tried to share that credit card number. Now, if that wasn't in place, if that DLP policy wasn't in place, if you could just imagine someone shared a credit card number or any information that you deem sensitive into a team that is open and everyone in this team can see all of this information. And now imagine if there were guests or external users that were added to this team. You now have a risk which was not malicious. It was someone sharing the information through a channel, but actually that channel is being accessed from people who are outside of the organization. So there is a risk of data leakage there. So DLP is an easy thing to turn on and can really help with a lot of those risks that come up. I did want to also show you an example of DLP policies, but not just in Teams, but also in the files within that team. So you can see here that I have a team called Sales and Marketing. And in my Sales and Marketing team, I've tried to share a credit card number again. I'm a naughty employee. And you'll see it's blocked. And I've reported it to my administrator. But what I could actually do, and if I go to my Sales and Marketing files in SharePoint online, so you can see this is my Sales and Marketing team, I have some files in here, but my administrator has also set a data loss prevention policy to say that credit card information cannot be shared with either people outside of the organization or people outside of this team. So that means that if I tried to share a file with credit card information in it, I would not be able to. It's only being able to be accessed by the people in this team in Sales and Marketing. So you will see, let me zoom in slightly again, you'll see that I have a file called credit card credit card info. I've been very creative with my naming conventions for this demo, as you can see, but I have credit card info, and next to it there is a little, notification or a little icon that says this contains sensitive information. You might not be able to do certain things with it. Now, when I've hovered over it as an end user, I can see there's a policy tip in here. I can click on the policy tip and it will bring me up the issues. This is why you cannot share this with people inside your organization or outside, because it contains a credit card number and it's for a PII retention policy. So again, we can customize this policy tip for users to tell them what we want to tell them. This is the default policy tip here. If I click on that file and open it up, I will also see, you can see there's my credit card number, but I will also be able to see a little notification at the top of the file, which again is the policy tip, and I can click on more options. It brings up the same banner. It just tells me why the item cannot, I cannot share it. So there's kind of clear definitions of or clear icons for the user so they can see exactly what files are protected. And if I just click X on that and then I try to actually share that, you'll notice that I only have the option to share with people with existing access. All of the other options are grayed out. Now, as an organization, we haven't grayed out these options overall in SharePoint. This is just for this one specific file because it has credit card information in it, and we've deemed it sensitive as an organization. So I can only send it to people with existing access, and that is what DLP essentially will do for you. It will do that across emails, Teams chat and channel messages, OneDrive files, SharePoint files or SharePoint sites. And there are actually a few different things that you can apply DLP to, which I'll come on to as we move into the admin center. So that's what it looks like from an end user perspective. What I want to do now is take a look under the hood and show you the admin center. Now, there's a couple of things that we're going to talk about before we dive into creating a policy. And that is, if I go to my Microsoft 365 Admin Center, I'm going to go to the Compliance Admin Center. Bear in mind, you need to be an administrator to be able to access this. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is identifying information that you have that might be sensitive to your organization. And there's a new tool called a Content Explorer, which is a very cool tool in the Compliance Center to help you identify exactly where you have sensitive information and just how much sensitive information you have as well. So if I go to Data Classification on the left-hand side and go to Content Explorer, you'll see here that I actually have a list of sensitive information types. This is the templated information types that Microsoft suggest. So Microsoft suggests that, credit card numbers might be deemed as sensitive. Debit card numbers might be deemed as sensitive. And you can see there's US and different countries as well, not just the UK, which is obviously where I'm based. So that's the one that we'll be talking about today. But if I scroll down, I can actually see how many instances I have of the sensitive information. I have 53 credit card numbers, 49 debit card numbers. If I scroll down, I've got 6 passport numbers and so on. So what I can do from here is say, okay, let's take a look at where these credit card numbers live. On the right-hand side, I can see I've got 41 different instances of credit card numbers in OneDrive for Business. So people are storing credit card numbers where they're not supposed to. They're storing them in OneDrive. So I'm going to click on this now, just to let you know, if you are a global administrator, you need to give yourself compliance manager permissions to be able to access this bit. So you'll be able to, as a global admin, you can go into your Content Explorer, but you will need to add additional permissions to yourself to be able to view this. And that's the the compliance manager. And I think it's called a compliance view permission as well. And you can do that from permissions on the left-hand side. I've already given myself those permissions. And so what I'm going to do is open up OneDrive. And now I can see in OneDrive, I've got 41 credit card numbers and I can see exactly where they are. I can see Patty has 2 files with credit card numbers. Jonas has 2. So if I click to open Jonas, for example, I can see exactly which files he has in his OneDrive that have credit card numbers in them. But I could also see the other, sensitive information types that are in that file. And what you'll see is that we have a high, medium, and low confidence. So it reflects how much evidence around the number, supports the item containing sensitive data. So for example, it might, for the high confidence, you might have credit card number, colon, and then a 16-digit code. That suggests that it is probably a credit card number. Whereas if it's a 16-digit code, but it's not formatted in the way that a credit card number is, then you might have a low confidence that actually is a credit card number. So I can really dig deep into the specifics of where things are in terms of sensitive data. The next piece I just wanted to mention is what sensitive information types are, because I've mentioned that a few times. Now, if I just go to the sensitive information types tab up here, you will be able to see that I have some sensitive information types which are suggested. They're templates from Microsoft. So you'll see there's a lot of different regions in here for different compliance laws. So if I just go to and search for the UK, let me see if it's going to let me search this way. Sometimes it doesn't like the dot in the middle, but you can see that I have different sensitive information types. For example, a UK driver's license number. That might be sensitive. I have a passport number, which might be sensitive. Now I can use these sensitive information types for my data loss prevention policy. So I can say to data loss prevention, oh, if anybody shares a driver's license number, I want you to pick that up and block it. Or you can create your own. So you can define what is sensitive to you. Is that a customer number, an employee number? Is it personal information, medical information, financial information? It could be absolutely anything that you deem sensitive, project codes, whatever it is that you deem as important information and sensitive, you can create that as a sensitive information type. So I tend to use in my demonstrations the suggested ones in here, but we have a lot of organizations will create their own, because sometimes it's not a driver's license number, it might be a customer number, for example. So now that we've talked about sensitive information types, let's look at data loss prevention policies. So on the left-hand side of my admin center, I'm going to scroll down to data loss prevention. What you'll see here is a page for data loss prevention. It's going to give me information about some latest news. And actually, this is a really good link to click on to find out any new features that are coming to DLP. You'll see on the right-hand side, I actually have some reporting. So I have the number of activities detected. So DLP is working, I've got policies in place, and it's actually picking up that there's 80 things in OneDrive that we've had to block. There was 8 Teams messages that we've blocked, and so on. So I can go in and I can view exactly what's been blocked and when. We're not going to spend too much time on that today. What we're going to look at is the policies. This is where we're going to create a policy in our organization to say that we don't want our information to be shared or accessed in certain places. You can see I have a list of policies that I've already created. And the ones that I've used, you can see I've used the templated ones. I've got UK financial data, which is a credit card number and a debit card number. I've got UK medical reports. I've got personal information in here. So these are policies that I've already created. But what we're going to do is go ahead and create a new one to show you really all the options that you have. So let's create a new policy. And the first thing you'll see is we need to decide what information is sensitive. What information do we want to protect? You can see we've got the examples here, the financial information, UK financial data, credit card numbers and SWIFT codes. I could choose privacy, so I could choose the GDPR, which is any kind of personal information. I have medical and health. And again, you've got custom. So any new sensitive information types that you create will appear here. I haven't created any, so that's empty, but this is where you'll see any ones that you've created yourself. Let's do medical and health, just to make it a little bit different, because I've got quite a few financial policies that I've used. So what we're going to do is we're going to detect the presence of any national insurance numbers or health service numbers from the UK. I'm going to hit next. I can give it a name and I can give it a description. Sometimes it doesn't let you click next without a description. Oh, I've already got one of those. That's what happens when you have a couple of different demos that you do. And now it's asking me to choose locations to apply that policy. Now, because obviously today we're talking about Teams, we are going to keep the Teams one on. So what this will do is it will apply that DLP policy to Teams chat and channel messages. Just to be to mention about the licensing, if you have Office 365 E3, you will get Exchange, SharePoint, and OneDrive. Anything below this point with E3, you will not have access to unless you buy E5 or the compliance add-on, and we'll go through that at the end. But it's just to make you aware, that's the biggest caveat with this, is that you need E5 for anything underneath OneDrive. But what you'll see is that I can apply this to emails. So I can say, okay, I don't want people to share national insurance numbers through emails, but actually they do need to be stored in SharePoint. So I'm going to take off SharePoint. So we could customize this. We don't have to have all of them on or all of them off. We can totally customize it. And not only that, we can actually choose to just include or exclude certain user sites or groups. So if we have a finance and HR team who require the use of being able to share and store medical information, if you're in the HR team, or financial information if you're in the finance team, we may actually want to just exclude the finance team from that group. So we can make it a little bit easier depending on who needs this policy applied, excluding and just including some people to this policy. So it's not an all or nothing type scenario with data loss prevention. Now I'm going to scroll down, and actually you'll see that there are a few more options in here. So we do have options. If you have the licensing, you can apply DLP to devices, and I'll show you an example of that because it's quite cool. I've got a slide later for it, but essentially if I try to print a PDF, or if I try to print something from my device or share it where I'm not supposed to share it, it will actually pop up on my Windows desktop that there's a DLP policy. I'm not allowed to do it. So it's quite cool. Cloud app security. So if we're looking at reaching to apps that are not Microsoft, so Adobe for PDFs that I mentioned, we can use cloud app security to apply DLP policies that will apply to PDF files as well as Office documents. And on-premise repositories, I do have a slide on that, so I will come back to that a bit later on. So you'll see that there is new capability that's been added for the purpose of this demo. I'm just going to take these off because it'll give me too many options. So I've now decided I'm going to apply this policy to these locations. I'm going to exclude or include whoever I need to. I'm going to hit next. And what I could do from here is I can now set policy settings. I can customize policy settings. Why is it not letting me do that? Okay, maybe let's turn these ones off. I think it's because I've already created it. So essentially what I could do from here, I've already created a rule for this. So it's giving me some errors because I'm duplicating myself with my demo. But essentially what I could do from here is I could create a rule to say, okay, I want you to, block this file from being shared externally. I want this file or this chat message to be encrypted. We can choose actions to protect that information, but we can create it based on conditions and exceptions. So we're going to call this DLP Teams and Chats Medical for the sake of having a title in here. And I can decide to add a condition. So only apply this policy if the content contains a certain amount of sensitive data, or if the sender is from a specific domain, or if the recipient is from a specific domain. And we can even go further than that by picking on specific groups or users. So I could say if the message contains, and I can put some keywords in there or credit card numbers if I wanted to. I could choose to add exceptions. So I could say, don't apply this rule with the DLP policy if any of the matches contain certain words, if it's by certain senders. So again, if I don't want this to be applied to our finance team or anything like that, I can put exceptions in here as well. And finally, actions. I can restrict access and encrypt the information. So in here, I can say, block users from accessing any of that information through SharePoint, Teams, and OneDrive. What I actually chose for that credit card file that you saw, where I can't share it with anyone, I chose to block everyone. So for that really sensitive data, you could decide to block everyone apart from the people and the administrators who should have access to it. Or you can just block people outside of your organization, which is the one that most people choose for a lot of their sensitive data. But if it's really, really sensitive, then you can choose to block everyone. We can turn on notifications. And again, I mentioned that we can customize the policy tip. So that policy tip that I mentioned, we can go in there and say share through secure file instead, or whatever it is that we want to tell the user. Now, this is interesting. This is user overrides. This is useful if you have false positives. So if someone has a credit card number or a national insurance number, that's not a national insurance number, it's just a 8-digit code, or it's just a 16-digit number. And DLP thinks it is a national insurance number, or they think it is a credit card number, we can allow the user to override the policy, but provide a justification. So they will have to say why they are overriding it. And what you can actually do is set up an alert. So if a user overrides 10 or more of these instances, then administrators will be alerted to check out what that user is doing. So this helps get over things like false positives to allow people to override that rule, but provide that justification. And again, here you have the amount of alerts that the administrators will get. So I can say, I only want severity or admin alerts for high incidents. When it occurs, I want you to send an alert every time, someone tries to share something sensitive, or just tell me when someone's done it 15 times. And this is quite a good option because then you're not being alerted, every 2 minutes if you're sharing that type of information as a business. We can use email incident reports to notify when a policy match occurs as well. So as well as alerts, we can get notifications via email, and you can add different people to that list as well. So I choose, and obviously we have the ability to customize the email. I can decide what is shared in that email with those recipients. I'm going to hit save, and it's not going to like me doing this, so I'm going to hit save. Let's just do. This is what happens when I don't fill in any of the information. It's not going to let me save it. Okay, we'll cancel that for now. Okay, so we now have the rule that we've created. So we can add actions. We've got a review here. We've got conditions, exceptions, and things that happen when that information is shared. It really doesn't like me because I've already used this in a demonstration, so bear with me a second. What will happen now is it will ask me to test it. I would always recommend testing it before you turn it on, because you want to make sure that it's working. It does take a while for it to turn on for all of the users as well. It takes about an hour. So test it out first with yourself. Make sure that you do still see the blocked notification, because if you turn this on and it's not working, then there is risks there that data will be shared that's not supposed to be. And I hit submit, and that set up that DLP policy. I can test it, and then I can go back and I can see it already exists. That's fine. I've already created it. I hit submit, and then I test it, and then I turn it on for all of my users. And it doesn't require any specific technical deployments or anything like that. It is just going in, clicks of buttons. The biggest thing you'll need to do is plan out your policies and plan out your actions and conditions. That's the biggest part, is the planning stage, not turning it on, because it is just for your admin center. So hopefully it's given you a bit of a demonstration on DLP from what it looks like from an end user perspective, and also an administrator, where you can go in, customize, and you have quite a lot of control over the DLP policies as well. So before we finish, there's a couple of other topics just to go through. What's new? There's a couple of new things. Now, I mentioned the devices and endpoint for DLP. Now, this is actually Chrome browser DLP and insider risk management. It's an extension which has capabilities within the Chrome browser of any kind of onboarded endpoint devices, which is really cool. You can see an example here. I haven't set it up on my account, so I've got a snippet. But you'll see a user's they're opening a PDF in Chrome, and then they're trying to print it. But because it's sensitive, on their actual device, a data loss prevention policy is popping up. They have the ability to override, and they have a business justification, and they can choose to allow it there. Obviously, you don't have to choose the override option. Users, if you don't want them to be able to do that, you can turn that off. So it's quite cool. And that's obviously with the Microsoft Cloud MCAS as well being used to reach things that are outside of Microsoft, which is very cool. So you can use Chrome as an approved browser in DLP, so people can work with sensitive data and it's protected. You can create custom and really, really fine-grained policies in DLP for Chrome to make sure that all the sensitive data is being properly protected from disclosure. So it's sorry, I get a bit geeky at the moment because there's really cool things being brought out with DLP. That's not necessarily Teams, but I think it's still worth noting. I mentioned the on-premise DLP as well, again, stepping a little bit outside of Teams, but it is still good to be aware of that Microsoft's on-premise DLP was really developed specifically to assist organizations to gain that visibility that you need for your on-premise data. What you can do is build an actionable data security framework and really better manage your data. So you have the ability to access permissions to on-premise file stores, so you can properly reflect the appropriate access controls. And you can actually move data from an unapproved on-premise location to another on-premise location that is approved. And you can provide markers, so you can be made aware of the change. You can request access, to the new location. Users can request access if they have a business requirement. And you get really clear visibility, so you can decide what data actually can be migrated to the cloud and labeled in a secure way, so you can use cloud services to enforce all the policies and much more. So there is a link for what's new and some of this cool stuff that's coming out that I'll post in the chat after the session. And finally, to end the session for today, I wanted to talk a little bit about licensing. So with data loss prevention for Exchange, SharePoint, and OneDrive comes with Office 365 E3. If you want anything more than that, for example, Teams, chat and channel messages, devices, and so on, you need to be looking more at the E5 SKUs. So to get Teams, chat and channel messages, you need Office 365 E5. But if you want the devices, the on-prem and the cloud app security, so you can do the PDFs and apply DLP there, you need to be looking at Microsoft 365 E5, because you need to be using things like an EMS, some of the security tooling in there, some of the endpoint features. So if you want everything all the options that I showed you, that is Microsoft 365 E5. There is a Microsoft 365 E5 compliance add-on to make things, less confusing, which you can actually add to your licenses. So if you're on Microsoft 365 E3, for example, you could decide to add the Microsoft 365 E5 compliance, which gives you all of this. It gives you the DLP policies. It gives you advanced e-discovery. It gives you the ability to have automatic labeling. there's quite a few different tools that you get. So if you didn't want to upgrade to full E5, then you don't have to. You can just add the compliance, and then when you are ready, then upgrade. But as I mentioned, if you do want the cloud app security and devices and so on, you do need to do the full M365 E5. So there's a couple of tricky things with DLP. You get some of it in Office 365 E3. If you want the rest, you need to upgrade, but there is add-ons available. And that is everything that I wanted to cover in today's session. Thank you so much. I'll hold on now if there are any questions. But again, you can find me at Twitter @GreeningCat. Please feel free to follow on LinkedIn, and my email address is there as well. But thank you very much, and I'll close now for any questions.